get you fresh water.
Thank you. Mr. Pearson, Mr. Altman, friends, gentlemen, ladies. You know, I'm a kind of semi-academic and think tanker, and when we get an audience, we love to talk. So I will try to, I was told to stick to 30 minutes first, now 20 minutes. I will try and keep to that limit. You know, one of the things, oh, good. Yeah, I was going to say, I always miss the clock on. It's right there. That's good. Okay, so I'm going to make some points. I think I chose that topic which may appear a little provocative, and I'm going to try and justify it. So as you can all read, and this is my personal thing. This is not necessarily the government's view. Let me make clear. So why do I say this? So there are a number of reasons. One is India's policy framework is now very good and will keep improving. You know, in the past, we've been flirted with all kinds of socialism. It's no longer true. The global environment is ripe for diversification. I'll say a little bit of the geoeconomics. You heard part of it. You read about it, etc. Then India's demography, human resources, and scale is really the only country which can provide an alternative to China. And finally, India has democratic institutions, economic motivation. That's very important. And geopolitical incentives, which a lot of people don't think about, but I think you have to start thinking about, to be a trusted partner of the US and EU. And particularly here, in my personal view, we need a joint policy response from India, USA, and EU. It's partly why I agreed to come and address, because there are a number of people from across the world here, and I personally want to give this message. So what is it about the framework? I have 3 slides, but I'm going to kind of rush through them to save time. So firstly, there is now a clarity in the role of government and private sector. This started in 91 reforms. I was part of those reforms. I dealt with it from the finance ministry and was involved in pushing several of them. So I can tell you that clarity has taken a long time in the overall polity of the country. Now it is very clear government has to focus on certain things which generally you talk about as public goods and infrastructure, the market environment, etc. And it's the private sector which actually competes and generates jobs. So a listing quick go through of reforms. You know, I won't waste time, but in 91, for political reasons, we focused very clearly on 2 aspects of reform, which was the product markets and all the financial markets connected with it and impacting on it. In the last 10 years, we have systematically gone through every area which was not reformed and taken it one by one, whether it's products and services, factor markets, public sector, institutional reform. And here I will just talk about a minute about GST, which people from abroad may not realize. GST is the first constitutional amendment related to economic things. It's the biggest constitutional amendment related to economic issues. And our founding fathers were actually very good in conceiving the economic structure, things like subsidiarity, etc., which you need not bother about. But what they didn't realize is that they gave goods taxes, goods and service taxes were assigned to the states. And they didn't realize this would fragment the market. So this required a major constitutional change to integrate the taxes and to integrate and make a single unified market. Just another list, strategic industry policy. Again, having worked on reforms for half my life, what people do not realize is that the policy change and its acceptance is a huge step. The implementation follows. Now, of course, in this government, there is also a reduction in the gap, but from my way of looking at it, somebody who's, for example, in 99, I wrote a 20-page monograph on what reforms were needed to India to come into the 21st century. That is, we are already 20 years into it. 90% of those reforms have been implemented, but it takes time, okay? So bureaucratic reform, infrastructure you're all familiar with because it affects your industry, and social welfare reforms. Second part, just very quickly, because you're again familiar with the geopolitical and geoeconomics. This, I said, the global environment is ripe for India. So one is the domestic reforms, and which will continue. I have absolutely no doubt the current government is going to be re-elected, and I'll, at the end of it, tell you why it will continue to do these reforms wherever they are needed. So geopolitical, you've all heard, but I'm a blunt person. I won't name the country, but these developments are very, very important. The professor was very hesitant. That's okay. Ignoring, of countries, ignoring the law of the sea in the SCS, use of pandemic as a cover for aggressive military action, deepest and broadest spy network in history. I was going to take some time. I was sitting with Professor and gave him these 3 examples. I don't know if I have the time for it now, but they are amazing examples which I have personally seen. Let me tell you one small one. In NIH, there was a researcher financed by the country, and he was, every night, he was going around the lab, downloading the data and sending it to PRC every night, okay? He was caught. It was found that he was taking a computer home, which he was not allowed to do it. This is 2010. Nothing happened to him. So look how things have changed. Now you read about every day, FBI has a case of spying. I have many other examples, some quite horrifying actually for me, but I don't have the time. So geoeconomics, deep and broad technology theft, by now you all heard about it. Economic threats to geopolitical opponents. You may not know, but we follow these things very carefully in Asia. There have been threats to South Korea when they did something, to Japan, to Australia, and many other countries, okay? This is not business as usual, okay? So pandemic, you heard of that the supply of certain types of things which were needed by the pandemic were cut from one country. So what is it? There's a lot of talk, but in 2018, 2019, I wrote that the world of the future was going to be high-tech decoupling and partial economic decoupling. I stand by that word. This is one of my personal things which I wrote in 2019 after President Trump's actions, I must admit, because that was the first sign that some action would be taken. Before that, I had given up hope. So now we call it de-risking. So these trends, in my view, are there. You have to watch for them if you want to be on top. How fast they develop, Professor has said perhaps not as fast, and I have no contention with that. So what are the trends which are important for India? Again, I will not go through all those. I wanted to mention there. So our goal is really sustained, fast, inclusive growth. And each of those words is important, but I don't have time to explain. But the following 10 trends I've just put down: the digitization, internet and hybrid systems, the work from home. This is going to be a huge trend and very important for India. Climate change, everybody talks about it, but the green economy, the way we look at it, we deal with it in a holistic and pragmatic manner, and this is going to be very important. Geopolitics of oil is very important for us. Again, I don't have time to explain, but our response to it is solar power. So our commitment to solar power is not just international, but national. It's going to be a driver of our growth. Aggression and threat of war, what we look at it is a threat is an opportunity. So this is an opportunity for us to develop our military-industrial complex. That's another area for you. The defense industry is certainly going to be very important implication there. And these last two things, the manufacturing monopoly, red carpet for M&E supply. These two I'm going to just talk about a little bit after this. And the demographics, I think that's very important. These two trends, I will try to give you my perspective very briefly. Okay, so here are the two graphs. The one on the left is world exports of merchandise goods over world GDP, merchandise GDP. Okay, same. And what you see, of course, is there a pointer here? I guess not. So what you see is that, look at the left, the big rise is from roughly 2000 to 2008. Then you got a flattening. Okay, look at it as a flattening. There's a lot of fluctuation, some may say downtrend, etc. But this is merchandise trade. On manufacturing, it's much sharper, actually. So there's actually a declining trend if you look at manufacturing. On the right, you have China's share, which is that red line, going up, up, up. No stop in 2008. Around 2008, it becomes the largest exporter in the world, overcoming those two lines are Germany and USA, but it keeps going, okay? Surprise? Not so surprising to me. Why? Because it's developed an export monopoly. This is a conscious thing, manufacturing export monopoly. It has 40% of the telecom, ADP, and electronics market. 2/3 of market at 4-digit level, 70 to 90% in 6 and 8-digit level. The most important new thing which has come out is that it has 70% of the market of cranes in ports. Why is that important? 70% of the market. Why is that important? Because these cranes have telecommunication. Everything which happens is known in China. There's a communication link, and there's a link for what it can do. You think of the consequences yourself. The US is now putting a policy of not allowing these cranes near US military installations. So the odd thing is, what I say, is that if this kind of monopoly were there in the US, there would be huge antitrust actions, but nobody bothered. So this is a thing which will have in the future. I don't think Professor would disagree with me. He has some very interesting charts which he showed me, that US was over-dependent on China, and that over-dependence relative to everybody else has already come down. Very interesting chart which I found. But let me move on. So what is the next? So that is one trend which is very important, and the implication for me, and my view again, is that what is going to happen is that those supply chains are going to diversify. Let me just go back. You know, it's not sustainable, okay? So some of that share is going to come to India. But when I mean some, I mean a lot of it has to come if you want to de-risk. Otherwise, there's no way. So there will be a shift in structure of world manufacturing exports. Otherwise, there will be no de-risking. So what is the second, the favorable? What is India's? I just want you to focus on those two red columns there. The first one is what has happened in the past for the last 30 years. The next column is the change in the next 30 years, okay? So this is the world share of working age population. That is what drives economy, drives growth, okay? So you see all the red lines down to Thailand there in the first one, and red all the way down to Vietnam. These are countries ordered by development stage, high income, upper middle, etc. Doesn't matter. But it's important for competitiveness issues, okay? That ordering. So, of course, you've all read in recent years about how it's, China's share, so which is down somewhere in row 9. So its share declined by 3%, is going to decline by 8% in the next 30 years. Okay, that is where the structural change is going to come from. So, and India, you can see at the bottom that green 0.3%. India's share, India is the only country whose share of working age, among these, you can think of these as, we talk about competition and collaboration. So I picked the countries which are important for this purpose. So India is the only one where the share will be rising. And lastly, the bottom line that India will supply low, middle, high, all types of skill levels. So India's advantage is the scale of all types of skills, low, middle, high level. When you look at these sort of things from share of India's perspective, they may appear very small. But the moment you look at it in a global perspective, they are huge. They are the only alternative to China. That's the basic point here. And just some numbers, because people, the resource pool, right? So just to give some example, the value added in agriculture is 18.5% of the total, but 45% of the workers are there, okay? And more than half are female. So there's a female thing. When we think of industry, we don't think of females. That's a contribution which you all can make, who work in India, that help us bring more women into the workforce, including in industry, in manufacturing. It's happening actually already in the South. So the gap is 26.5%. If we take 1/3 of this gap and put this into manufacturing, that will double the manufacturing output. So that is the scale, okay? It would double the manufacturing output in India. That is the scale of the availability of when I say low scale, doesn't mean they are ready to just walk into a factory. You have to spend a month, 2 months to train them. And that is what is now beginning to happen. At the bottom, the 17 million unemployed high school graduates, again, they are not as if they can automatically walk in and manage an industry, but with a little bit of training, they can, okay? So this is huge. You compare it with the set of all competitive countries and see the totals. They'll be less than this. So that's the point of making scale. There's nobody who can match the scale. Okay. This is something I use for my own people, but I'll just say it because some of you may find it interesting. So what we have done here is looked at outward FDI. People, even in India, still say, they used to say that the opportunity is only on the China side. You very nicely broken it into these two camps. So let me give you a little bit of those numbers which I look at. So just forget the table. I mean, it has the numbers. But from my perspective, these 5 countries which I have listed there, US, EU economies, UK, Japan, Korea, they are the source of 60% of global FDI, which is 7 times China's. They import 53% of the world manufacturing imports, which is 5 times China's. And PRC has been a major beneficiary of these supply chains. All this has benefited China. That's why I like that table which you have. It shows clearly the bias of the US policy towards China, the dependence on China, not on India or anybody else. I don't deny our weakness in policy, but that's why I've given you all the policy change at least, which has happened in the last 10 years. Forget the 91 reforms. So you're not looking at India carefully enough. I'm sorry to say that, but I'm a very blunt person. Okay, so from my perspective, in fact, I told this to people from the US Embassy. I am very clear. Our interest lies in closer interaction with, the first block which you said. Okay, so you people are all aware of it. I'll kind of skip over most of these, the supply chain, etc., and come to the last point, which is India is now laying out the red carpet. This is the first time in history. We used to look down on MNCs. No longer true. Please believe me. Okay, we want them. We know how important they are, and they will be an important part of driving growth. That's where DHL comes in. That's one of the reasons why I agreed to give this talk. Okay, let's move more quickly. So, I made this graph or a graphical representation because I really believe that US, India, and EU have to have a joint policy on manufacturing. And the reason is that each person is trying to address the PRC challenge in its own way. It will not work. Okay? And so and secondly, that's first reason. You all are addressing the PRC challenge, but you make general policy. We all. I don't want to say India's exception. So my point is that if you focus carefully on where the actual challenge is, then you won't mess up all the rest of the policy. That's my basic point here. And for that, you have to do it jointly, okay? Otherwise, it doesn't work, okay? So focus on the challenge, focus your policies on it, and then leave basically free trade, which you all like, for the rest of the world, okay? Don't mess up all the policies for everybody. So how are we doing it? Just, I'll say, so our focus is on two things, which are, the US has adopted now, we were doing it for some time, which is FTAs with the developed countries. I showed you, that's why I put the developed countries on top. It's very important that FTA to get this closeness now, because we wasted so much time, and that's the only way to give it a kickstart. We don't have time. It has to be done in the next 5 to 10 years. And the second is what we call the PLI scheme. I won't talk about it, I'll just conclude. So here is the words of PM from an interview he gave to the FT on 21st December 2023. And I'll just read it out and finish. I won't look, I'll just put the conclusion there and see if there's any time left. I don't think there is. Okay. We aspire to create conditions where everyone sees value in being in India, to invest and expand their operations here. We envision a system where anyone from around the world feels at home in India, where our processes and standards are familiar and welcoming. Familiar and welcoming. That is the inclusive global standard system we aspire to build. Don't get misled by the word Atmanirbhar Bharat. It is not isolationist. These are the PM's word, in a way, for somebody like me who gets a check from the government. This is like the gold standard. This is our job. He has laid it out very, very clearly. Please, I don't have any doubt. It is job of people like me to listen to the problems and see where it needs to be corrected. Obviously, it has to be my judgment. Okay, I'm just going to leave that there, and I don't know how much time I took. But if there is time, I can take some questions, but otherwise it's up to you. No further time? How much time did I take?
Thank you, Dr. Vilmer. You can stay here.
Okay.
We're just going to add some people.
Yeah.